Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more overly sarcastic productions, and this time Trope Talk Mentors. Um, Hold on. Well, brain just blanked. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Mentors. If you are writing a fantasy novel in particular, you literally have to have this trope inside of it. There's a reason why it's remember, there's always a reason for why things are tropes. Tropes are tropes because they work. Okay? Um, that's just how it is, right? They, and of course, it's always nice to subvert tropes, but really, you don't have to worry about subverting some tropes, right? There are the mentor trope I would consider to be one of those tropes that you don't need to subvert. Of course, one way of subverting the mentor trope is to not kill the mentor, and instead get them perhaps out of the picture in a different way by like either injuring them to where they can no longer fight alongside their trainee, whatever it be, right? But the usual following through of this trope is the mentor dies before the end. Um, usually they die like within the first book, if we're talking books, or the first movie. Star Wars: A New Hope with Obi-Wan, but then Obi-Wan is able to continue being Luke's mentor a different way, blah blah blah. Or there's this one book series that I read. I'm not gonna name it as to not spoil it potentially for anyone that has not read it yet and wants to. There's this book series that I read where the mentor did not die in the first book. It was a 4-book series. The mentor did not die, but they did end up dying within the 4th book during the ultimate like climax of the overall narrative of that series. And it made me cry. I bawled like a baby. Um, ah, ooh, it got me good. But you know, and then of course, Spider-Man. The first Spider-Verse movie. Uh, the mentor dies within like the first 30 minutes of the movie. It's been a while since I've watched it, so I can't remember. I also haven't watched the second one yet. Oopsies. Um. Anyways, mentors. Let's dive in.
This video is sponsored by Campfire, the only mentor guaranteed not to die on you.
Well, so long as the website never gets shut down, as long as they keep making a profit and business can keep their doors open, it won't leave you.
Heroes, paragons of virtue, stalwart, brave, and true. And more often than not, more than a little lacking in the sense department. See, heroes usually serve as the audience's inroad into the narrative world, so it benefits the writer to make the hero inexperienced and naive so they can ask questions about the world and plot that the audience also needs answers to. And when your hero is inexperienced and naive, it's only reasonable that they need a guiding figure to help them figure out those tricky first steps along the hero's journey. That's right, they need a mentor. And lucky for them, mentors are in ample supply. Fiction has mentors for days to give our errant heroes all the guidance they could ever need until they die 3 chapters later. Whoops. So mentors come in a lot of
Let's see. Mentor types. Classic mentor / the Obi-Wan. Scary, badass mentor. Reluctant mentor. Wacky trickster mentor. Evil mentor. Secret or blatant.
flavors, but they mostly fall into these 5 categories. Category 1 are the classic mentors. Wise, friendly, and helpful, just a little cryptic, but that's okay. This mentor serves a key role in the hero's journey as they exist to guide the hero into the journey. They're usually old, benevolent, wise, kind, maybe just a little cheeky on occasion, and most importantly, very easy for the hero to get attached to. That way, when they inevitably die right after the hero's journey begins, the hero gets all upset. And yeah, these mentors basically always die. This is because they know too much, and their wisdom would make it too easy for the hero to figure out the early steps of their journey. Killing them off early forces the hero to navigate the tumultuous early stages of their story without their guidance. However, these mentors don't have to stay dead. Sometimes they'll turn up again as ghosts or shiny upgraded versions of themselves, but only after the hero's progressed enough that they don't desperately need their guidance anymore. Basically, these mentors
Okay, I'm gonna disagree with the Gandalf one, actually, mainly because of the purpose of Gandalf's purpose, as far as I'm aware of the understanding of how the wizards work within the world, Lord of the Rings world, different, but like, why these mentors tend to get killed off, but then they come back in some form or another, is because, they get if they're alive, physically alive still, they can then, do badass things. And essentially, it's like, well, why can't they just go and handle it, right? They're the mentor. They're still alive. They can still do kick-ass things. Um, you kill them, but then you have them be like a force ghost, right? They can't directly interfere anymore, or at least not direct. They cannot, dir- directly deal with the world and its issues like they could when they were alive. So though of course, because of the Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker and how they dealt with Force ghosts, that kind of muddles the whole how directly can a Force ghost actually interact with the world. They kind of made that more confusing without really considering the consequences. Anyway, oh, God damn it, I lasted how many minutes before talking about? Well, you know what? Obi-Wan was used. I get a free pass to talk about Star Wars in this one and rant, okay? So, have I mentioned Star Wars in every single trope talk? I think I have. I need someone to go through every trope talk and see. Actually, the Dragons one, I don't think I did. The Dragons one might be the only one where I did not talk about Star Wars. It might be the only one, though. Anyways, right? You kill off the mentor and they become a ghost. They can still impart wisdom and teach the protagonist, but they can't solve the problems for the protagonist. They can't be the audience can't no longer has part of the suspension of disbelief. If the mentor is alive and still imparting this wisdom and stuff, but and the writer is continually telling you or whatever that yo, this mentor is badass or something, like Obi-Wan. Like if we look at Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan was um capable, and this may not be the best example, was now of course this is stuff that was made after the original trilogy. So it breaks a little bit of perhaps what may have been the original intentions that George had when he first made the movies. But episode 3, Obi-Wan manages to beat Anakin. Obi-Wan TV series, Obi-Wan beats Anakin again. But then in the original trilogy, we see Obi-Wan surrender and let himself be killed. Um, and essentially, what that does, Obi-Wan dying in episode 4, and you're watching it with the context of the newer stuff, the stuff that came after, you're like, well, if Obi-Wan had been alive, Obi-Wan would have been able to beat Darth Vader himself, right? But plot, Obi-Wan dies. Obi-Wan cannot be used to solve the issues in episodes 5 and 6, right? Blah blah blah. It goes down to Luke is the one that solves them, whatever plot. Poor example, mainly because George didn't think probably too deeply about the ramifications of what it kind of looks like. It's like I love Revenge of the Sith. It's my favorite of the Star Wars movies, but of course, the fact that Obi-Wan beats Anakin so handedly and within the universe, we're kind of led to believe that Darth Vader in his suit is a weaker form of Anakin, right? Um, though of course over the years Obi-Wan gets much older and loses his skill, whereas Vader, Anyways, rambling too long. I forget the original point I was trying to make. There was something else I was wanting to say. God damn it. Hold on. Let's go back.
But
Yes,
these mentors don't
Gandalf
have to
in
stay
Lord of the
dead.
Rings.
Sometimes they'll turn up again as ghosts or shiny upgraded versions.
Gandalf's purpose is different than this classic mentor. My understanding of why the Astari were sent, right? Yeah, the Wizards of the Astari were sent to Middle Earth was to guide humanity in the right, like, kind of serve as mentors and guides to push humanity in the right direction of facing down Sauron and ending Melkor's, servant. Um, but what the purpose of the Astari in particular were was Gandalf's kind of there to learn the people and like kind of gather everyone. Saruman would have been the one that like kind of takes on that more leadership role of pushing the heroes to their task. Gandalf guides and gets them on their journey, but he doesn't really take too much of an entirely like when he transitions from the Gray Pilgrim to Gandalf the White, he takes on a much more direct role in the affairs of Middle Earth. Um, Gandalf the Grey, I don't think would have walked up to Denethor and smacked him, but Gandalf the White does. Gandalf the White directly challenges Saruman, um, in a way that Gandalf the Grey wouldn't have or simply couldn't have, depending on if their powers were truly, there were tiers to their powers. I always kind of figured they were like always like meant to be equals in the ranks of the Astari. It's just that they served different purposes, right? Anyways, my dog is barking. Let's see if he stops. Okay. Continuing on.
Versions of themselves, but
I
only
hope
after
the
the
Lord of the
heroes
Rings
progressed
rant
enough that they
there
don't
made
desperately
some
need their
sense.
guidance anymore. Basically, these mentors dip out right when it's most inconvenient, take an extended vacation while the hero runs around freaking out and getting into trouble, then saunter back into the storyline at their leisure when the hero no longer needs their help. A step down the friendliness ladder is the scary mentor, a mentor figure who's mean.
One thing I'm realizing, in A Song of Ice and Fire, does Jon Snow have a mentor? I mean, I guess technically Ned Stark was his mentor, but that mentorship, the Ned Stark mentorship was pre-books. Like, so within the books itself, we don't really well, actually, yeah, Jorah Mormont. Duh. No, not Jorah. Gior. What the fuck? No. The Jorah Mormont's dad who's at the wall. Is his name Gior? Jor? I think it's Jeor. I can't remember. I need to reread the books. Oh yeah, he's the mentor for Jon Snow. I always forget.
Terrifying and
Never
ridiculously
mind.
skilled. These guys don't guide the hero into the story. Usually the hero seeks them out for training partway through their arc because they're the best of the best. And don't expect the scary mentor to want them for a student. Usually they'll try and scare the hero off or otherwise dissuade them and will only accept them as a student after some kind of proving themselves thing. Scary mentors don't do positive reinforcement. Usually their teaching method is, at its nicest, sink or swim. This is not to say they don't genuinely care about their students, only that they won't readily express it. Scary teachers can be reasonable and secretly good, or they can be genuinely kind of malicious. It can be hard to tell which is which, but a good way to gauge it is to see how they treat characters that they aren't training. Sometimes scary teachers are only scary to their students as part of the teacher-student dynamic and are totally nice to anyone else, but if they're a dick to everybody, they're probably more on the malicious end of things. This mentor is less likely to die than the other variants, but if they ever start acting uncharacteristically nice towards the hero or telling them how proud of them they are, watch out. In a similar vein to the scary mentor is the reluctant mentor, who doesn't necessarily have the ludicrous skill or badassery of the scary mentor, but does have all the crankiness. Reluctant mentors really don't want to be mentors. They're cranky and disillusioned, they don't like the hero or want to help them, sometimes they don't feel like they should be a mentor. The hero will eventually win them over, but it won't be easy. This is usually because the mentor has a personal reason to want to avoid getting attached to a student. Sometimes a former student of theirs died or turned evil and they took it like really personally, but sometimes they're just kinda steeped in general self-loathing. Unusually for mentors, reluctant mentors actually have a character arc. The wide-eyed protagonist they're mentoring will usually gradually soften their jaded worldview, and over time they'll become their student's greatest advocate and protector. Unfortunately, it's not too uncommon for reluctant mentors to subsequently heroically sacrifice themselves for their students, so they're not immune to the mentor death curse, but it happens less often than with the classic mentor. On the other end of the seriousness spectrum is the wacky trickster mentor, a mentor who doesn't like making their true intentions fully obvious and guides or trains the hero in weird or confusing ways. In fact, some wacky trickster mentors outright pretend not to be the mentor just to screw with the hero even more. Wacky mentors give their students bizarre or inobvious tasks, never explain why, and generally give their student the runaround. One very common way for this to manifest is the trickster mentor telling the hero to do their basic household chores. About 70% of the time this is actually sneaky training, but sometimes it's just chores. The hero usually finds this frustrating, but the mentor's training and guidance always end up being useful, and while some of their shenanigans might just be personal eccentricity, most of it is genuinely helpful, and the hero will eventually appreciate the trickster mentor's odd methods. While these mentors don't usually die, they're not immune to the mentor death curse either. It doesn't usually serve the plot. It just happens sometimes. Being a mentor is hazardous. And the final category of mentor is the evil mentor. Yep, some mentors aren't actually good. Evil mentors have a lot of range for what they're good at teaching. Some of them are all about teaching their students to defy authority and be true to themselves, but some are more interested in grooming evil minions and will teach them some badass fighting skills and also to never question their authority. Evil mentors come in two flavors: secretly evil and blatantly evil. Secretly evil mentors are usually great mentors who genuinely like their student and are often the most supportive figure in their life. This is so that when they inevitably reveal their evilness, the twist hurts like crazy because our hero loses trust in the only figure who really supported them. Secretly evil mentors also usually deliberately hide their evilness from their student and are very unlikely to try and convert them to their side. They're more likely to want them to be better than they are and will frequently support their heroic attempts to oppose them. Secretly evil mentors stand a strong chance of dying post-reveal, usually after a moment of heroism or reconciliation, again, for the feels. Meanwhile, blatantly evil mentors are a whole different beast because they make little to no attempt to conceal their evil. Their student usually just doesn't realize exactly how evil they are for a while, but that's just because they're trusting or unobservant or have no frame of reference. And when they figure out the depths of their villainy, they usually bounce and start opposing said villainy. Not always. This is sometimes a villain origin story. Blatantly evil mentors are much more likely to try and convince the hero to join them, and the hero's arc is more likely to center on unlearning whatever villainous stuff they picked up from the mentor before leaving. Blatantly evil mentors are very likely to die eventually, since they're both villains and mentors, two of the deadliest career paths in fiction. So that's the
Can we talk about the disappointment that is Batman trilogy there? Because Batman in the first movie, and I can't remember if it was the same in the second movie, but was it the same, or was it designed similar in the first and second movies? But like, at least in the first movie, right, Gotham has this very unique Gotham vibe. And then, at least in movie 3 of the Nolan trilogy, it's just Chicago. Like, come on, man.
the general breakdown of mentor variants, but there's a core quality all mentors share that creates a problem for writers. Since mentors are guiding or teaching the hero, this means they must either be more knowledgeable or more capable than the hero.
And this is what I was talking about earlier, and why the wise mentor tends to die, is because if they stay alive, then it brings up the question of why do we even need the hero? Now, the book that I was talking about, where they had the mentor die in the fourth book and not in the first book, that series actually did a really good job of justifying why the mentor is still there. The mentor, because of the forces at work, the mentor can't do everything, right? And the hero, right? The hero needs to do things, blah, blah, blah. It did a good job of justifying keeping the mentor alive and also keeping him a part of the plot, blah, blah, blah.
So why is the mentor just guiding the hero instead of handling the plot themselves? Why do we need the hero
And
at all?
why the hero
This isn't
is
a hard
needed.
question to answer, but it does need to be addressed.
Hero is the chosen one, mentor is too fragile, mentor doesn't care, mentor is evil, mentor is dead. Oops.
And most commonly, it's answered in one of these 5 ways. Option 1, the hero is the chosen one. The mentor's got all the knowledge or skill the hero needs, but the hero still has to be the one to handle the situation because they're the chosen one. Sorry, nothing we can do. Best of luck though. Option 2, the mentor is fragile. Mentors are often pretty old, and even without that, they can have debilitating illnesses or injuries from their time as a younger badass hero. They would have been able to handle the plot if they were in their prime, but unfortunately, they're not strong enough anymore, so all they can do is pass on what they know to more capable hands. Option 3, the mentor legit does not care. Sure, the hero is deeply invested in the plot, but the mentor's got their own stuff going on. They're cool with helping the hero out, but they don't really care enough to handle this stuff on their own. And that's fair. When you're that badass, you can pick and choose what you're personally invested in. This is more common with scary or reluctant mentors than the other variants, and also this variant is very likely to show up in a climactic moment when our heroes are in trouble for a big damn hero's rescue if the protagonists get in over their head, because they don't care about the plot, but they do care about the hero. This is also a very easy way for them to die, so yeah. Option 4, the mentor is evil and is either causing the problem directly or has no interest in fixing it. Yep, obviously, evil mentors aren't likely to be super invested in helping the hero oppose the other villains. The hero has to take their powers and training and repurpose them for good instead. Option 5, the mentor is dead. Yep, the easiest way to solve the problem is to just kill the mentor before they can fix anything. Oh no, what a tragedy. Not the mentor figure. Dead? Who could have foreseen this? On that note, we should really talk about why mentors die so much. See, main characters don't actually usually die that often. I've talked about this in the Trope Talk on character deaths, but basically, killing a character permanently cuts off all future potential for that character. I mean, duh, right? But that's a major loss. A dead character can't grow, can't develop, can't have interesting dynamics with other characters. It sacrifices all future character potential for one big emotional gut.
I disagree on the uh character interaction part because and I think A Song of Ice and Fire does a good job of proving this point. Ned Stark's death is a gut punch, and same with Robb Stark. Both of their deaths are absolute gut punches, but they continue to get mentioned in by the other characters in the stories and in the books post their deaths, right? So you are still getting, I guess maybe interactions isn't necessarily the right word to use, but I still would consider it interactions. It is still those characters thinking fondly and thinking on that and kind of interacting with the memory of that character, which in a way keeps that character alive, right? And it's one of the reasons why I love A Song of Ice and Fire and how death is handled in that series. And the point of death, right? Like Ned Stark, like I think what we'll see if we ever get Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, Ned Stark and Robb Stark are going to continue to be mentioned post their deaths, but Tywin Lannister is not. His death brings about the end of the Lannisters. He's going to be forgotten because he was feared. People only were scared of him. They did not like him as a person. They were only scared of him, and that is not how you be remembered, right? He was not a good person. Ned Stark was respectable. He was, honest despite also having the biggest lie in the entire series, Jon Snow. Right? Like Ned Stark is remembered for the right reasons, sort of thing. I like that form of handling death because it's thematic.
Punch. This is why so many character deaths are actually fake-out deaths where the character comes back eventually, and also why you can usually tell the fake-out deaths from the real ones by how much potential is lost and how many unresolved plot threads would be left dangling by the death. Heroes don't usually die. Lancers don't usually die. Comic relief characters don't usually die. Love interests die sometimes, but that's usually just to make the character who liked them feel bad, and designated love interests usually don't have much character potential beyond future happy ending for another character, so it's not much of a loss, narratively speaking. But mentors die like it's going out of style. The only deadlier professions in fiction are night watchman in a government facility, street tough in a biker bar, and mom. Mentors die a lot, and I'll tell you why. First off, the obvious. It hurts.
Since the hero and audience is attached to them, it's easy since mentors very rarely have arcs outside the hero. There's not much to do with them in the long term.
Mentors matter to the hero, so by extension, they should matter to the audience. If you can't kill the hero, you can still hurt them, and killing the mentor will hurt the hero and thus the audience. Of course, this is only as effective as the audience's relation to the hero. Some mentor deaths are very painful because the hero is well written and their emotional response resonates with the audience, others not so much. Next up, it's easy. Mentors' arcs are almost always centered on the hero. Other characters usually have arcs of their own, vendettas, MacGuffins, romantic subplots, etc. But the mentor is mostly just there because the hero needs a teacher. So in a sense, they're easier to kill off because their loss only affects the hero's character arc. They don't usually have an arc of their own, and in the rare cases where they do, they can still totally die after fulfilling that arc. A reluctant mentor who learns to value themselves and their students has no remaining potential to lose, so killing them becomes easy and narratively efficient. For the record, this is also why parents and love interests die so easily. If they aren't really a character in their own right, killing them costs nothing of value and gives the hero that sweet, sweet angst. In short, mentors are easier to kill than other supporting characters with their own arcs and motives, and they also strongly impact the hero because they helped and supported them, so they feel the loss more strongly. Between these two factors and the fact
like when it comes to looking at it from a more looking at it from the writing perspective, right? If we dive a little deeper into the thought process behind the decision to kill the mentor. Personally, you want to give the mentor their own personal arc or something like that, or at least their own motivations for the future, right? And once it starts looking like they are going to fulfill their goals of the future, you kill them there. right? You kill them just short of that goal, or once they've kind of have achieved that goal, kill them, um, because it's just uh, particularly if there is still more story to tell, you kill them. Because if there is still more story to tell and they're still around, but they don't really have more to do, right? What is it that they can provide then to the story so that they're just not kind of standing around as an extraneous character, right? You've spent the time to develop this character, give them an arc, and then now let's say you have one more book to write or something, or half a book to write, um, and it does like you've built up this character, but now their story really doesn't have anywhere else to go aside from just hang around with the hero until the end. The hanging around with the hero until the end is a little bit, I would consider that more disappointing, the more disappointing option, right? They're just like you made this character, he's badass, and then his arc is done, and now he's just kind of hanging around with the hero until the hero solves the problem, sort of thing. That's a little boring, right? That's not exciting. That's not. It feels like you're doing injustice to that mentor. Well, what would be doing justice? Having them sacrifice themselves for the greater good. Um, Kill them off in some epic battle. It feels like you're giving them justification. You're increasing a threat to the protagonist because now the mentor is dead. The mentor that taught the protagonist everything, that person is dead. So now it's like, oh shit, the bad guy is a real problem because how can I fight someone that just beat the person that taught me everything, right? So now you've handled multiple problems with one decision by killing them. So usually I also kind of look at death as every decision, or well, every decision when it comes to writing a book, writing a story is what is the most. It has to be a combination of both interesting and makes sense, right? There are things that can make sense, but they would be absolutely boring. So then obviously you don't want, like, sometimes that can work. Sometimes, like, I think now and then you can make those decisions. Like, it makes sense. It's boring. It makes sense, but then you gotta supplement it with other things that are like make sense, but it's really and it's not the one that like maybe makes the most amount of sense, but it is super interesting, right? Um, those are the kind of things you got to think about in balance as you create a story. Is balancing the sensibility of the decision making and the are they interesting choices to make? Will they lead to interesting pathways? Um, and honestly, I think this is one of the factors as to why I think George is taking so long to write Winds of Winter, is because one, the first book released like 30 years ago, right, or close to it. Um, so he has changed as a person and a writer over the time that he started the series. But also two, he George is one of the best writers in fucking literary history. Um, so he's definitely cognizant of the fact of, all right, sensible choices with what he's established in the decades of the past, um, in writings of his from decades ago, and to what would he consider to be the interesting choices now as he's writing it currently, right? Though that's so I think he's probably struggling a lot with that, and also the fact as you get older, you get slower. It's just a sad reality. I do believe we will at least get Winds of Winter before. I personally, I am an optimist, and I think we will get the last two books. Fucking hope. I need to know how the story ends, man.
that mentors run the risk of making the plot too easy to resolve, it's no surprise that mentors die so frequently. It's easy, it's painful, and it keeps the hero's journey from being too simple. Even if the mentor is a character in their own right, once their arc is satisfactorily resolved, there's nothing keeping them out of the danger zone. And on top of that, what else are you going to do with a mentor?
It hurts since the hero and audience is, oh, we already read this.
In the long run. The fact is, heroes typically outgrow their mentors. They learn all they have to teach, and whether or not the hero recognizes this, the mentor usually notices. When this happens, the mentor loses their only solid anchor in the narrative, that the hero is depending on their guidance. Once the hero outgrows that, the mentor is kinda cut loose. Maybe they have an arc of their own.
She does such a better job of explaining these things than I did. Like, this is essentially what I just rambled about for like 5 minutes, and she's covering it within 20 seconds.
But more commonly, the mentor either goes off and retires or, well, dies. This is a major weakness of all characters whose arc is entirely dependent on another character. They lose all narrative value when their link with that character stops being relevant. But at the same time, not all characters need to stand on their own. Sometimes the point of the character really is just how they interact with the hero. Just because mentor deaths are easy doesn't mean they're ineffective or bad. Let me take a minute to talk a little bit about Into the Spider-Verse, and there will be spoilers, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear them. Into the Spider-Verse bombards Miles with mentor figures, because the main theme of the movie is summed up pretty succinctly with the Great Expectations motif. Everyone's got expectations for Miles. His dad wants him to get a sterling education and apply himself academically. Classic Spidey wants him to follow in his footsteps and basically just dumps the power and responsibility thing on him. Miles has the power, so he has to take on the responsibility. Peter B. Parker is a classic reluctant mentor who just wants Miles to figure himself out but is really bad at actually mentoring him. The other Spider Peeps are all trying to pull Miles in the direction of their personal brand of Spider-Manning. And of course, there's Uncle Aaron, who's not really dumping anything on Miles, but is encouraging him to be himself and express himself artistically in defines of authority and all that jazz. Now, because Spider-Verse is oops all mentors, it's really not clear who's actually gonna die. Spider-Man Classic bites it pretty quick, fitting the classic mentor Obi-Wan archetype. He's just there to pull Miles into the hero's journey before kicking the bucket at the most inconvenient possible time. Then the movie puts most of the focus on Peter B., the chronically depressed, reluctant mentor Spider-Man who's running on pure power and responsibility because he's systematically lost everything else he has to live for. Along with all the other Spider Peeps, Peter B. is more than willing to step up to the self-sacrifice plate and stay behind to activate the collider, even though this will mean literally disintegrating. Peter B.'s got death flags for days, but he survives and ends the movie in a much better place than he started because he's actually secretly not a mentor. He doesn't teach Miles much of anything. Instead, Miles teaches him to regain hope in his future and a love of the people in his life. I've seen a few people put forward the opinion that Miles didn't need Peter B. as a father figure, Peter B. needed Miles as a son figure. Miles is the catalyst in
I like that phrasing. I like that a lot.
Peter B's personal character arc, which is why it's much more meaningful for him to survive the movie and pick up the pieces of his life back home than it would be for him to heroically sacrifice himself. The rest of the Spider Peeps aren't as attached to Miles, except for Spider-Gwen, and she also turns out to not be much of a mentor because she and Miles are more like peers. She knows more than him, but she's really not interested in teaching him. Again, Miles is a catalyst for her character arc. She closed herself off after the death of her dimension's Peter Parker, and Miles is the one who gets her to open back up again and start reconsidering the benefits of friendship. Miles needed a mentor, but Peter B needed a kid and Gwen needed a friend, so neither of them really got any mentoring done. And the other Spider Peeps don't really get that personal connection with Miles. They like him alright, but none of them really think they have the time to get his personal arc sorted out while they figure out how to not die in the next 24 hours. But then we get the Davises, Jefferson and Aaron. Miles' dad, Jefferson Davis, is stern and puts a lot of pressure on Miles. He only wants what's best for him, but it produces a lot of tension between them. And then once Miles gets his powers, that tension only grows. Now Miles can't be fully honest with him and avoids him more and more. Jefferson knows something's wrong, but doesn't know how to talk to him about it because their dynamic is more constant pressure than anything else. Miles is a pretty chill kid. Jefferson is a very straight-laced guy. Jefferson embarrasses Miles in public, Miles acts out while unsupervised. Miles does something, Jefferson criticizes. Jefferson does something, Miles is embarrassed or resigned. That's their dynamic, and it's a stable dynamic, but it's not a great one. Jefferson is also set up for a character arc. He and Miles need to find a way to communicate. And as we've established, mentors are usually safe until their character arcs are resolved, so he's in the clear for most of the movie. And then there's Aaron. Friendly, supportive, suave, and cool. The chill rebel in contrast with Jefferson's straight-laced cop. By far the character Miles is most comfortable around. The reason Aaron doesn't seem like a likely choice for the mentor death curse is because he doesn't initially seem like a mentor, at least not compared to the other options running around. The movie misdirects us. It introduces him early as a casual part of the inciting incident. Miles indirectly gets bitten by the spider because of him, and then he vanishes out of the story because he gets a business call. Miles spends so much time looking for someone to teach him how to be Spider-Man that we don't notice that there are other mentors at play in this movie. And while Miles is busy juggling half a dozen spider people and dodging his dad, the true mentor figure is playing out his own arc. Aaron is moonlighting as the Prowler, directly opposing Miles and the gang without realizing who he's dealing with. Yep, Aaron is a surprise evil mentor of the secretly evil variety. Miles absolutely freaks out when he learns this, and Aaron freaks out when Miles reveals his identity. But when he refuses to hurt him, because despite his villainy, he could never hurt Miles, Kingpin kills him. And in hindsight, it really shouldn't have been a surprise that Spider-Man's origin story involves his uncle getting shot. Whoops. Aaron's death is a catalyst for Miles.
You know, that's a good fucking point. That one was a... God, it's such a good movie, man. It's the best Spider-Man movie.
Jefferson's dynamic arc. His death compels Jefferson to open up and reach out to Miles in a way he didn't seem comfortable with earlier, and admit that he just wants what's best for Miles, and whatever Miles chooses to do, he knows he'll do great. This in turn provides Miles with the pep he needs to sort out his powers and come into his own as Spider-Man. Aaron is the only mentor figure with no expectations for Miles. Jefferson's character arc involves letting go of his expectations for Miles, and when Miles becomes his own kind of Spider-Man, the other Spider Peeps drop their expectations of him, because the only way they knew how to teach him was teaching him to be like them, and instead he ended up like him. And that's fine. Every other mentor has an arc of their own, but unfortunately for Aaron, he was a good mentor right from the start. He just wanted Miles to be himself, that was the whole point. And when he dies, he just reaffirms that. He wanted Miles to look up to him, he let him down by being a supervillain, and getting himself killed because of it, but he believes Miles is the best of all of them, he just needs to keep going. Aaron is the only character in the story whose death narratively outweighs his character potential. By dying, he produces a ton of angst and hurts the audience, illuminates the tragedy of the dangerous and immoral lifestyle he chose, serves as a superhero origin for Miles, and motivates Jefferson to mend the rift with his son, which in turn motivates Miles into getting over his self-doubt and gaining control of his powers. Any other character death would have been cheap, but Aaron's character really earns it. Lucky him. So the point is, Spider-Verse is really good, go watch it. Mentors come in a lot of flavors, but are sometimes a little too narratively anchored to the protagonist, which can weaken their characters on their own. Mentors die because it's easy, but that doesn't mean killing off mentors is inherently bad writing. It's much more important that you choose your mentor deaths for maximum effectiveness, because a dead mentor can be a cheap gut punch, or it can be the biggest tragedy in the narrative. But also, killing mentors that'd be more interesting alive is probably not a good idea. So, choose your dead mentors wisely. So, yeah, thanks.
Yep, and that was Trope Talk Mentors. And essentially, as it always comes to be when it when at the end of these videos and stuff like that, when it comes to writing advice, simply, honestly, when you're writing your story and you come to a point where now you're like, what do I do with this character? Where is this character going? The most important question to ask yourself: what is the most interesting decision for this character? What is the most interesting outcome for this character? For their arc. What is the most interesting and satisfying? You have to have, like, you can't just have it be I hate the term that became popular when the Game of Thrones TV show was out and it became what the showrunners thought was what made their show good, was their unexpected deaths. That's not what made the show good. But that's what they thought, and they took it, and clearly, no, they were fucking wrong. They don't know how to write at all. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are trash people. Anyway, like, there are behind the scenes stuff that's become revealed that, like, the fact, like, anyways, that's a rant for another day in time. But right, like, what is not the most unexpected? Don't do things that are unexpected. Do not make decisions because, like, oh, the audience won't expect it. No, you want to make decisions that are narratively interesting and narratively satisfying. You want those intertwined. You want the best balance of both. That's essentially what you want to go for. You want, right? Because sometimes the most interesting thing may not be the most satisfying, right? And the most satisfying thing may not be the most interesting thing. Unless, of course, you are writing, say, cozy fantasy. Cozy stories that, the expectations there are, I'm expected to feel good and be satisfied, right? So, like, not right? It depends on the story that you're writing. In the case of, like, epic fantasy, which is the one that I think I can most speak on, and really most stories in general as well. Um, you want to balance the three things: interesting, satisfying, and makes the sensibility. Does it make the most sense? You want to balance those three things together when it comes to making decisions for character arcs and things like that, and plot beats, plot moments, and character deaths. Right? Uh, is it you don't want it like there's a time and place for things to kind of be unexpected, but you also kind of want to lay the groundwork for them to not be wholly unexpected, right? Tropes exist because they work. Tropes exist because it is what we want in our stories. Like it's what we like in our stories. They wouldn't be tropes if they. Now, of course, there are some like fridging is an example of a bad trope, but like most tropes, when I say a trope, um, like mentors or uh, tragedy, there are certain story beat expectations that the audience has that a good amount of people are going to want. It just depends on what is your goal as the author. Is your goal to follow the typical beats of that trope, or is it to try and twist and turn? Um, don't try and twist and turn a trope because you feel like it's something you have to do. Do it because it makes sense for the story that you are wanting to tell. That is like the best advice that I ever heard when as I started getting into my writing journey is worry about the story that you're trying to tell. Do not worry about like writing a story that's made to be published. Because here's the thing. If you write a story, this is a side tangent, but I think it's important for anyone out there that is also trying to become a writer. Um, don't write a story solely because you think it's a story um, that will get you published. Write a story because it's a story that you want to tell. Sometimes those two things can interlap, but a lot of the time they don't. um, right? Don't write what is popular now because here's the thing. If you try and write what is popular now, it's going to take you, let's say you're a fast writer like me and you can write um 5 stories within a year. I can write I can churn out if I'm feeling properly motivated, I've got the ideas flowing. I can churn out like 500,000 words in a year. And get most of that properly edited through by myself. In a year I could churn out 500,000 words and have it uh edited to the best of my ability. Um so that's essentially 5 novels, right? 5 typical novel lengths, right? Novel length around 100,000 words for debut authors. Um, if you are to, so let's say you can churn out a story that quickly. That comes out to what? 100,000 words every um 2 to 3 months, 3 months or so, 3 4 months. No, it's like 250,000 words every 6 months. So 125,000 words every 3 months. Is your average there. Let's say you can churn out 125,000 words in 3 months. Boom, you have a roughly a little longer than a debut novel. All right, so you churn out 125,000 words in 3 months. You're gonna have to edit it yourself. That's gonna take you probably 1 or 2 more months to edit it yourself to the point of where it is acceptable in my eyes of being sent out to agents and things like that. All right, agents, that's going to take you a long time. That's probably going to take, if you're lucky, maybe you'll get an agent within a year for that story. Well, it's going to probably take you at least 1 more year, maybe 2, before that book is on bookshelves and available to be bought. Because your agent is going to sell it to publishers, and then Your agent is going to have you edit it some more, and then the agent is going to send it out to publishers. Then your agent is going to negotiate deals, get you the best deal possible so you can make some money. Um, and then boom, the publishing company might do some more editing. Really depends. Um, and then they've got to do. Uh, they're gonna have you market it because they're not gonna market it for you. You have to market it yourself. So they're gonna give you like a few months or so, maybe even a year, to market it on your own social media platforms. And then boom, it's on the bookshelves. That's a process for one book, 3 years. By the time that book is published, it is not going to be the whatever you were writing at the time is not going to be the trending thing. If you were focusing on writing what was trending at the time of writing it, right? Trends don't stay for like 3 years. They stay for maybe a few months at most. Um, right? So, yeah, a little bit of what I consider to be some decent writing advice here at the end. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.